Anub'Arak. So, rogue cards here. Anub'Arak is the rogue legend. It's a 9 cost with Death Rattle. Return this to your hand and summon a 4/4 Nerubian. And now this is a card, any 9 mana creature had better be good. And this is a card that I think is actually pretty powerful if what your deck is trying to do is play a attrition-based game. Excuse me. The problem with that is that Rogue is not really a class that is particularly interested in generally playing these attrition-based minion battles. Rogue's strength typically is its ability to play a powerful tempo game and win the sort of attrition fights with card drawing from Sprint, or things like Auctioneer or whatever else. And a big minion that is looking to sort of allow you to grind people out with value in the late game doesn't feel like it has a home, at least in any existing Rogue deck. This is a card that will, it doesn't really do anything the turn you play it. It doesn't have taunt. It doesn't impact the board in any sort of way other than just be an 8/4. And I think that it's powerful. Like, I think that if this were a card that existed in, say, Warrior, I think this is a card that a Warrior deck would play. This is a card that in the Control Warrior mirror would often be unbeatable because, it just allows you to just grind people out. The problem is that Rogue doesn't have really the tools to leverage it. Rogue doesn't have great healing. It doesn't have a hero power that extends games. It doesn't have really the context for this card to be good. So I think this is a card that would be good in another class, and we see this actually quite a bit with some of the legendaries that exist. It's a late game attrition grind card, and that's something that some classes want. It's not something that I think that rogues want. So maybe there's a world where that kind of rogue deck exists, and if it does, this is going to be a powerful card in it. But rogues, I don't think, have the tools to really leverage the value that Anub'Arak generates, so I don't expect it to see play. All right, Poisoned Blade. And this is a kind of interesting card. So it's a 4-cost 1 attack weapon, which on its surface is pretty bad. But you can use your hero power to buff it. So this was actually originally in like alpha or beta, was the rogue hero power was equip a dagger or give your weapon +1, and that was just totally busted. This is kind of a return to that effect, but with a pretty high upfront cost. Paying 4 for this 1/3 weapon seems pretty weak. It is a 3 durability weapon is pretty good if you're able to leverage things like Deadly Poison or Tinkers on it. But compare this to, say, Assassin's Blade. Assassin's Blade gives you a high durability weapon that already has 3 attack. And if you're relying on Deadly Poison or Tinkers to build up a big weapon, I would rather start with Assassin's Blade. Using your hero power to pump this, you invest 6 mana before you get a 2 durability or 2 attack weapon, and if you use it the turn that you play it, you're losing durability as well. So my inclination that this is just not a very powerful card, and that it probably won't see very much play. If there are effects to increase the weapon's durability, like if there's an Inspire, give your weapon, your weapon +1 durability, which wouldn't really make a ton of sense in Rogue because their hero power otherwise would replace their weapon. But this is a card that feels like it takes too much investment to really get to a point that it is giving you a lot of value for how much you're paying for it. So my guess is that this isn't a card that shows up a lot, but I've been wrong with Rogue cards before because I don't really play a lot of Rogue. So that's my sort of initial impression of this card, but I'm open to the possibility that I could be wrong. All right, this card has the best name in the world. Burgle. It's so funny. I mean, this is basically Thought Steal. But it's a Thought Steal that doesn't actually steal cards from your opponent's deck. It steals class cards. And in some ways, that is better because on average, class cards are going to be better than the cards than neutral cards. It is more likely to give you spells than minions because there are more, I believe, class spells than there are class minions. And it can actually just give you cards that are extremely powerful late game cards that your opponent doesn't even have in their deck. So, I mean, this is definitely an interesting card. This is another card that would go, I think, into sort of a late game value style of rogue deck, like Anub'Arak would want to be in, because it's helping you generate advantages over time. But it's not. It doesn't really seem great to me. Thoughtsteal at least is guaranteed to give you cards that your opponent chose to put in their deck, but there's also a lot of class cards that just aren't very good. If you burgle someone and you get like Silence from a priest, it's like, yeah, maybe that's okay in the appropriate context, but being able to get like a minion that's high enough quality that they chose to put that in your deck is, I think more likely to give you a good result, a good value from your Burgle or from your Thoughtsteal. So this is a card that I think that again may see play if there is a late game rogue style of deck that wants to sort of have this additional value. Maybe that's the same deck that Gang Up goes in because you want to be able to grind your opponent out with late game value stuff. But right now those don't exist, and I think that you need a lot of additional tools that would improve Rogue's survivability before they could. Cutpurse. Now this is a cool card. This is a card that is going to enable Rogues potentially to sort of break the general dynamic of mana, kind of like Druids can. Which maybe, again, is a card that could go into that sort of late game style of rogue deck, because being able to play your sort of your higher end cards before you normally would be able to is pretty meaningful. One of the best things about Cutpurse too is that the coin is a great way to enable combo. Rogue is actually the class that uses coin the best because of the nature of combo cards. Things like SI Agent give you huge tempo swings in large part because of the combo value that the coin gives. So I think that this is a card that stat-wise, it's not great. This is a card that is going to be easy for your opponent to remove. It's easy for any 1 or 2 drop minion to kill. It dies to all the early weapons. But if this minion actually hits your opponent, it's huge value because the coin is worth a lot, both in terms of, again, enabling combo and in terms of actually just letting you play a more powerful tempo game because you're able to play spells faster or minions faster more significantly. So it's hard for me to gauge exactly where this card will land because it is definitely weak against decks with early minions, but at the same time, if you're playing a rogue deck and you're playing a rogue control style deck and your face hunter opponent has to attack your 2-drop, that costs them a lot. That costs them a lot of their early board presence, a lot of their early damage. So this is kind of like just a must-kill 2-drop. It's very, very Knife Juggler in that way, but it's even stronger against decks that normally wouldn't care about Knife Juggler. So I think that this is actually a pretty exciting card, and I don't know if it's going to be good enough just because the stats are fairly weak in order to actually see play, but it is definitely a card that I would keep my eye on for the sort of deck that may not really necessarily exist just yet, but certainly could because of this. Shado-Pan Cavalry. So basically, this is combo, make a Boulder Fist Ogre turn earlier. And that might not seem that good, because Boulder Fist Ogre, people are like, oh, it's just not that good a card. But if Boulder Fist Ogre costs 5 mana, Boulder Fist Ogre would be great. So this is a card that is another card, yet another card, that may fit into the context of a sort of mid-game, late-game oriented rogue deck. Another card that we've seen in that vein is Trade Prince Gallowik, by the way. And Trade Prince Gallowik is super powerful. He just doesn't fit into any of the existing rogue decks, because they're so specifically built toward doing this one particular thing with Tinker Oil and everything. They're very tightly built. So having a card, even if it's just a really, really powerful card, doesn't necessarily fit into that framework, so it doesn't really see that much play. But I could definitely see a deck that does play a card like Shado-Pan Cavalry along with Trade Prince Gallowik and maybe these Cutpurse and things like that. It's more of a mid-game style of rogue deck, mid-range style of rogue deck. The biggest problem with these sort of mid-range types of rogue decks is their vulnerability to aggressive decks, specifically hunter decks. That's actually been the biggest weakness of a lot of mid-range style decks and control decks that are not either priest or warrior. because of the fact that they can just die to damage because their hero powers don't actually keep them alive. So I question how effective these sort of mid-range and late-game style of rogue deck can be because of how ineffective the rogue hero power is at keeping the player alive. And in particular, rogue is a class that, by the nature of its hero power and by the nature of many of its best cards, like Deadly Poison, like Tinker's Sharpsword Oil, does leverage its life total a lot in order to gain carded board advantage. It takes a lot of blowback, if you will. And that is not really conducive to a long game style of deck. And I mean, you even see the Tinker decks that are not geared toward playing a long game. They're geared toward getting to a certain point and then combo killing the opponent, basically. And even those decks frequently have a lot of healing in them. So you have to imagine how much more healing that you'd want to play in a deck that really was planning on going to a really long game and winning via these sort of strong mid-game cards and via attrition. So I like the fact that there are a significant number of cards in this set that push Rogue in that direction, and I hope that we can see new styles of Rogue decks come out as a result. But I am sort of hesitant of thinking that they'll be successful, in large part due to just how much damage Rogues deal to themselves because of their hero power and because of the typical reliance of the class on weapons.